welcome to episode 2 of BleatCast. And our guest today is Mr. Ashwin Kalmane, who is an luminary, an OG from the Indian comic scene. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, in fact, he is one of the writers who I used to actively follow when I was thinking of making a transition to comics, to creating comics myself. So Ashwin is the creator of work books like Shaitan, Enter the Dragon, from Holy Cow, also Operation DK from Holy Cow, Raj Rahman from Bullseye Press, and Adira Mohi, and the most recently released Zalim manga, which I just wrapped up reading yesterday.
Right.
Uh, so yeah, Ashwin, welcome. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's always been like a thing to have a deep conversation with you about a specific topic, which I'll be talking about in a bit, right?
Right.
So
Right.
again, thanks for forfeiting your lunchtime and coming on board. So are
This
you
is not
you?
my lunch time.
Oh, okay, okay. That's all right. So, okay, so I'll just explain why I wanted to have you here today, right? So, one thing I noticed, right, in this whole Indian comics podcasting universe, right, the topics that are generally talked about are either, it's talking about a specific book or a series of books, or talking about a creator and how their life has been and things like that, right?
Right.
There's very few podcasts that actually talk about the creative process itself,
Right.
right?
Right.
Especially from a writing perspective. From
Correct.
an artist perspective, there have been a few here and there, right? But from a
Right.
writing perspective, not many that I've come across.
Yeah, that's because I don't think writing is considered an integral part of comic book writing. I think they
Ab-
just assume that people write it and somebody makes the comic book and the art is the star of the show, which it
Absolutely.
is to a large extent. The art is what sells comics. But
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right there. Like, a reason why I'm saying, I'll give you an example, right?
ah,
I work my day job, right?
ah,
I'm a user experience designer, right? So it's kind of
correct.
like a creative arts
Ah,
profession, right?
right.
Or there are a lot of people from the creative arts who are
Ah,
working in this industry, right?
correct.
Even they do not know. Like
Ah,
when I say I create comic books, right? Or I write comic books, they're like, oh, you drew this. They're like, no, no, I wrote it, right?
correct.
Even they don't get it. So yeah, it's a bit of I don't know why, it's a bit of an enigma why people think of it that way. But yeah, that's how it is. That's a reality, right? And now we are here, trying to expose this
Right.
this deep state conspiracy that of burying comic book writers and the artist dominance and things like that.
Correct.
So all right. So okay, let me just maybe start off with a bit of a flashback question, right? So at what point in your life did you feel like you wanted to become a writer, right? Or was there a specific moment, like inciting incident, as we call it, right?
I mean, it's nice to listen to inciting incidents in comics and stories and stuff like that. But I don't think there was an inciting incident in my life. There were a couple of things actually. The first time I remember actually writing something was back when I was in college, I think. I
Hmm.
just wrote something and gave it to my friends, and they were like, "This is very nice. You should make it into a comic." But it turned out to be a piece of shit because it's not very good. That was my first attempt at actually putting down words to this thing,
Hmm.
and I don't think anybody. I don't think if I read it today, I would actually like it. It was about a spy and stuff like that. It was
Okay.
about a series of spies and hackers and stuff like that, and I don't think it was very good. But around 18 years ago or something, I wrote something called Night Shift. It's
Hmm.
supposed to be so my wife, right, she had a friend who was working in TV,
Okay.
and that person said, maybe you could write something for us for television, like we are doing a horror thing and maybe you could write something for us for television. She didn't tell me, she told my wife, and my wife told me that, and then I sat and wrote something which was around 18,000 words or something,
Hmm.
and I gave it to her.
Oh,
And she's like, "This is not something that will work for TV." So
okay.
that was another thing that was shot down. The thing is that that thing that I wrote around 18 years ago, I'm trying to rewrite it as a novel now.
Interesting.
So yeah, that is what it was. And after that, yeah, now I'm writing comics. I don't know how, but yeah, that's just how it happened.
Got it. So, so you said that the first story you wrote, right? Like your friends told you that you should make this into a comic. Why
No, no,
comic
no.
though?
Not that wasn't a comic. The first story that I wrote, they said you should uh, do something with it.
Ah, okay,
I
okay,
don't
okay.
think they said anything specifically comics, but
About comics, okay.
uh,
But then where did this turning point happen of, I want to write comics?
uh, I don't know. So around a few years ago, right? Not 18 years ago, around 10 years ago, maybe. Vivek approached me and
Hmm.
said, I want you to write comics for me. And at that time, I was also interested in writing stuff. So I had started exploring that avenue. Like,
Hmm.
I should write something.
Hmm.
And Vivek approached me and for Holy Cow, and he
Right.
said, why don't you write a comic for me? So, which is when I wrote a short story for him, which is in Aghori.
Hmm.
It's a
Right.
short story that I wrote for him, and it didn't do terribly well. But at that time, the editor was Ram, and
Hmm.
he sort of liked the story.
Okay. Nice.
When I sit down and think about it, it's not really a very well written story. It's not a well written comic, but I still had some sort of, into the comic industry. So that's where I started. So if you ask me how I got into comics, it's just because of friends. I don't think I would have gotten into it if I did not have friends in the industry.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, the relationships part. Yeah, I think that's something we'll come to in a bit also.
Huh.
The story you wrote was the one with the twins, right? Ugra and Gyan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's actually two characters I'm using for mine in my book
Correct,
as well.
correct, correct.
Interesting, interesting. So, okay, and the in terms of creating that first story itself, right? Because it's probably the first time you're sort of dealing with. Wait, hold on. But before Holy Cow, you did Pulpocracy as well, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
wrote for Pulpocracy as well. That was
Yeah.
those were short stories,
Right.
and I'm kind of very fond of those stories. I don't know why,
Hmm.
but I really like those stories. It was so another another friend of mine, Kailash,
Yeah.
he had asked me if I want to make comics, and I said, yeah, sure, why not? And then he, along with me and Sudeep, another writer,
Yeah.
decided to put together as many stories as we could find for a horror anthology, and we made like short 4 page or 6 page comics or something,
Right. Right. Right.
and we wrote for that. And
Right.
that was a fun experience. That was my first experience writing comics. That was the
Right.
first time I ever wrote comics.
Right.
And if you look at my script now, it's very, very weird right now. So I don't think you should look at them. But
But I remember bits and pieces. It was a while ago. It is some
uh,
shootout at CST or something like that.
that's the science fiction comic that I wrote
Yeah.
second after that. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Correct,
Antariksh Tales, right?
correct, correct,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So, how was that experience like? Because you're moving away from prose, right,
Uh,
to writing something that involves like panels and camera angles, and
correct.
you need to sort of inspire your artist to produce something that's in your head, right? Was there a
Huh.
challenge there in translating it to the comic medium?
Frankly, I was quite bad at it even back then. So that time I was I was moving from writing prose to actually writing comics.
Hmm.
So even my comic book scripts felt like prose. They were like very detailed, very dense.
Right. Right.
I had like paragraphs on paragraphs just of panel descriptions. So
Right. Right.
it was very weird, and I was having difficulty differentiating the panel descriptions and dialogue spoken. So there was too much dialogue even back then,
Hmm.
which is why I don't think I did a very good job, but I like those stories. I still like those stories quite a bit.
Hmm. All
Yeah.
right, all right. And how was the sort of artist assigned? Was it like a random choice from the editor, or did you team up with someone?
At that time, yeah, it was just I just wrote the story. I didn't know anybody in the comics industry. I still don't know anybody in the comics industry, but I didn't know anybody back then. So Kailash got to artists and said, hey, we're doing this anthology, maybe we can team up on something. And he sent out my stories to a couple of artists,
Right, right. Okay,
and
okay.
they decided to do it.
All right, all right. Was there like some sort of collaboration, like back and forth between you and the artist?
There was basic stuff that they were asking, like, is this supposed to be like this, or is that supposed
Right,
to be that? But I don't think it was very I don't think they asked me a lot. Like they sent, like the usual artist writer process. They sent me thumbnails. I looked at the thumbnails and I said, maybe you should change this, maybe you should change that. But
right.
there wasn't much interaction between me and the artist. Like at every point of time, there's always someone else involved in this process. Like
Understood.
even when I was writing for Holy Cow,
Hmm.
Vivek was sort of involved with me and Gaurav, or me and somebody else, Abhinash maybe.
Right.
Or when right now Ravi and the artists are also in that group.
Right.
Now it's becoming a little, you just do whatever you want.
Hmm.
The editor doesn't interfere too much.
Right. Got it. I mean, yeah. So once you build that working relationship,
Ah,
then things become a lot more
correct.
smoother, right?
Yeah.
All right, all right. And because you mentioned television at first, right? I'm
Uh-huh.
curious, like, have you written for any other medium?
No. So the first thing that I wrote, right, Night
Hmm.
Shift, the
Yeah.
book that I wrote, that was originally supposed to be a television thing,
Okay.
but I still don't know anything about television and how to write for television and dialogues and descriptions and all of that. So I just wrote a novel, a prose novel, of
Right.
a novella, not even a novella. It's like a prose long story.
Right.
And I wrote it and I gave it to this one. But I don't think I've ever written for TV or film or any of that before. Like I've
Right.
had no exposure to that writing.
But it's something you're pursuing right now, right? I suppose.
Uh, I would like to,
Hmm.
but it's too intimidating for me. Like I don't think I can work. I don't think I can work with people. That's that's essentially my problem. I
So
don't
like
think I
a concept of a writer's room is
can.
a bit
Yeah, I sleep.
scary, I suppose.
I sleep here and I write here. That's my writer's room. That's it. Nothing else.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so then maybe okay, we get down to a little bit more of the process, right?
Huh.
When you're thinking of a story, right? Like how does it come to you, right? Like is it usually like do you get the whole story in your head, or do you get scenes, or maybe just an idea, right? Or just a character?
I have, like, even now when you look at my works, none of my characters are well defined. I don't write characters well enough, so characters are completely out. How I get ideas is like I'm randomly doing stuff and I get an idea. Maybe this would be cool.
Hmm.
Maybe if this person did this would be cool. It has
Hmm.
nothing to do with who's there, what's there. It's basically the inception is from an idea.
Right.
Get an idea, it evolves over time, and that's what I build on. Then I put
Hmm.
characters and see if they work for the story. If they don't
Hmm.
work, I take them out, put in some other characters.
Hmm.
That's how my stories work. So it's always been that an idea has always come first for me. That's that's what I treat as like top tier work. I don't think characters are as important as idea, because
Right.
that's the
Right.
kind of writer I am.
Right. Got it. And like, do you sort of have like a bank of these ideas that you like you just pick out and use for whenever the circumstance?
No. Circumstance always requires me to come up with new ideas. I have a bunch of ideas, but
Right.
I'm too lazy to actually flesh them out. So when someone comes to me with they say, let's write something about this, then I have to think of something new. I can't
Okay.
use any of my existing ideas for that.
Got it. Okay. So it's more of impromptu, right? Like
Ha,
it kind of comes at the moment, right,
correct.
where it's needed.
Yeah.
And okay, now once you have this idea, right,
Hmm.
what's the process of fleshing it out into a full-fledged story?
So like I said, I have the idea, then I add characters, I remove characters, I kind of write stuff.
Hmm.
My comic writing process and my book writing process are very different.
Okay.
Uh, like if you look at my book writing process, right, I've been writing for the past, I wouldn't say past 15 years, because it's been around 15 years, but I haven't been writing actively.
Hmm.
Like I wrote 1 or 2 years like at the beginning, and now I've started around 6 months, no, maybe a year ago, writing sort of sporadically.
Hmm.
So it's uh I forgot your question. Was it about
Like how you
how
end
I
up
build
fleshing
on it?
out the
Correct,
the
correct.
idea into a full-fledged.
So for that story, right, for the novel,
Uh,
I wrote the entire story based on an idea I had. It was about
okay.
zombies,
Okay.
and these zombies attack a call center, and then stuff happens there. That
Hmm.
was the basic idea I had right at the beginning.
Right.
After that, essentially, I started adding more and more characters. I started adding more and more situations. Uh, Even now, I'm adding entirely new characters and putting in their whole stories from the beginning to the end. So
Hmm.
it's always evolving in that sense when I'm writing a novel.
Right.
While writing a comic book, I just write it. I don't think I think about like stuff that happened before. Like even now, if I go back to my comic book and read it, right, I feel like, oh, this could have been much better. This could have been different. So I don't think there's much forethought into writing a comic book. It's
Okay.
entirely different.
Right. You don't have like the problem of procrastinating, like, just letting the idea marinate in your head, to, or do you just, just put it out the moment you have the idea?
So if you look at Adira Mohi, right?
Yeah.
The first two books, the first one wasn't all that great, but I still love it. I put that out in 30 days. The second
Wow.
book also I put out in 30 days. So the book was actually, those books were actually ready in 3 months
Interesting.
from inception to execution.
Right.
The third book took me slightly longer, maybe 4 or 5 months.
Hmm.
And the fourth book took me more than a year to write.
Okay.
So it kind of varies. I don't know what happened to me or how I came up with those ideas, because I still think the second book is the best of the lot.
Hmm.
I still think that's the best, and I wrote that in 30 days.
Hmm.
So it's very surprising to me that even, and the fourth book is not very good. So it's
You
surprising.
shouldn't be saying that.
I mean, it's not bad. I think the essence of that story is good. There's a good
Hmm.
story there. I just didn't tell it very well. I don't think I put in stuff that I should have put in. Like if I read it now, I'll still think, oh, this should have been better. That should have been better. But
Hmm.
it's still not a bad story. It's not a very good story. So I have that barometer of comparing everything to that book 2 of Adira Mohi.
Right. Got it. And is
So
it the speed that you mentioned, right? Is that more to do with like you're really sort of inspired and charged by the idea? That's why it's fast. It's easier to get it out faster.
so here's the thing, right? When I sit down to write, uh, I don't like the process. I don't write sitting down and writing. I don't like that at all.
I 100% agree. Yeah.
It's very irritating sitting down and putting words to paper. And like if you're just doing it for the heck of it and you're just typing, it's all right. I mean, it's just going by and you're doing stuff, and it'll probably be scrapped at the end of it. But if you're sitting down and writing a comic book, or you're sitting down and writing prose also, right, it's too much effort, and it's not fun at all. I don't like writing at all.
100%.
But at the end, when you get your book, right, you're like, wow, this is something.
Yeah.
I should keep doing this.
Correct. You have that. I don't know. For me, at least, I have this out of body experience, right? Like the moment I'm like, who wrote this? Like, I wrote this when.
Exactly.
So that the point you mentioned, right? Writing is torture, right? Like I wholeheartedly subscribe to that, because whenever I see people posting stuff like, hey, I write my journal because it's cathartic, or I write poetry because, like, dude, like, how I want to be you, right? Uh, yeah. So writing is, see, in fact, like when I'm writing, I cannot even listen to music
Correct.
because I need to focus on the
Yeah.
words.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, it's a very very painful task, which a lot of people don't realize, and I have this pet peeve that whenever publishers ask, "Hey, have you written something yet? Is it ready yet?" I'm like, you don't know what I'm going through, right? So yeah, 100% with you there, right? Uh,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, okay. Do you do you follow the concept of like drafts? Like, do you keep revisiting the story over and over again?
So right now I wrote Adira Mohi 5, right?
Hmm.
I've been writing that for more than, I think, almost a year now. Again, I wrote something and sent it to Ravi. He said, "ठीक है, चलेगा, कर लेते हैं ये."
Hmm.
That was about 6 months ago or 5 months ago or something.
Hmm.
Then 3 months ago, he came back to me and said, "This is not working. This is not a good story." And I read it and I realized it's not a good story. So then I had to go back and write something. And I wrote that and I read it and I didn't like it again. So then I had to go back and write another story. So
Oh, okay.
this is the first time this is happening to me, that
Hmm.
I'm writing stories that aren't. This also happened to me for Adhira Mohit too.
Right.
So it's happened for specific books where I write something and I don't like it, so I have to write it again.
Hmm.
So I think it depends on a project to project basis. Like if you have some project, it depends on how you explore that entity. Sometimes it just comes out. It's just there.
Hmm.
Like the third book of Adhira Mohi, I just wrote it and it was just there.
Hmm.
Salim manga that I wrote recently, that just
Yeah.
I had an idea that in fact was an idea I had before.
Okay.
I had pitched it to Vivek before, and he said this is a good idea, but we are not doing it now. So I
Right.
pitched it to Ravi, and he said, "Yeah, let's do this."
Hmm.
And I just wrote it. I didn't think about anything. I just wrote that story, and it just came out.
Right.
So
Now that you say it, it could have been a good caster story somehow.
yeah, I guess so. Which is not a bad story, yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that is one way of working at things, and the other is the Adhira movie where I spent months and months working on it, and it still doesn't come out well. But
Hmm.
it varies on project to project.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
So reason why I asked draft specifically, right? Because
Ah,
I've noticed this thing with at least with myself that
ah.
okay, first of all, I have a problem getting started. Okay, like the idea just keeps like
Ah,
running.
percolating. Yeah.
At least it's let's say until 3 years ago, right? I
Ah,
had this thing that I should
mhm.
not be putting anything on paper unless I have it all
Figured out.
figured out in my head, right? Which I
Ah,
realized is a terrible idea, right?
yeah.
You
Yeah.
never have
Very
it figured out in your head.
true.
So then what I realized is the first draft that you do, right? Or
Ah,
like what they call the vomit draft or whatever, right?
correct. Correct.
It's going to be terrible, right? But
Yeah.
you need, or at least me, I need to get that first draft out
Right.
to even move on to the more interesting ideas that I want to do,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Correct.
So right now, I've changed my process a little bit that, okay, whenever I have an idea, I
Ah,
do that first draft. I know I don't have an ending, I don't have a
correct.
middle, nothing I have, right? But I still put it
Correct.
as a draft.
Right.
Only then I can move on to the other thing. So I feel like drafts, and so that's one thing, right? And
Ah,
second thing is, at least from my perspective, I sort of, let's say I write the story maybe thrice. Okay.
hmm. Okay.
Like one is just draft one is purely for the plot, right?
Correct.
Draft two is for the character arcs, right?
Oh.
And draft three is for dialogue, which is a nightmare, right? We come to the dialogue bit, right? So I tend to think of these three as three independent stories.
Okay.
They
Okay.
all need to sort of work independently. If you're just
Correct.
looking at these three, they still
Correct.
need to work, right? So that's why for me, the idea of drafts has really sort of helped. It's not like I didn't know that there were
Ah,
drafts before, but it's just that the moment you internalize it, then things start working
yeah.
a lot better.
So you're a much better writer than I am because I don't go through all these processes.
No,
Like
no, no,
it's,
no.
it's
No, process
I'm a
doesn't really
different
define.
writer. Fine.
Yeah, no, no, I don't think process really defines how good a writer is, right? It's just what works for each
Ah,
person, right?
correct.
For me, I need to go through structured approach.
Ah,
Otherwise, it doesn't work. But
correct.
it's not always like that.
Right. Right.
So, okay. Now, this again, talking about marinating in your head, right?
Ah,
When do you know? I mean,
ah,
okay, when you're doing a commissioned work, right? Of course, there are
correct.
deadlines, right, that you have to stick. So, if you
Right.
have to deliver a story on a date, you have to, right?
Correct. Correct.
But let's say you're doing your own like passion project kind of thing, right?
Right.
When do you know that a story is ready to be told?
I don't think you can ever know whether a story is ready to be told because, like, even 2 months later, if you read something that you've written that you thought was excellent,
Yeah,
you'd find problems with it. You will
correct,
always find things that you can improve and write better and stuff like that. So,
correct, correct.
I think it's always important to just write stuff out, try
Right.
and fix it as much as you can, and then move on to the next project. I
Hmm.
don't think it makes sense going back to something. You can
Hmm.
always fix it in the future in another story. Like if
Right,
you've done
right,
something wrong here, you fix it in another story in the future. I
right.
don't think it makes sense going back to what you've done because that way you'll spend your entire lifetime just writing one thing, and even that won't be published at all. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
You know who this reminds me of?
Huh.
It's George Lucas, right? Like when he did that whole retweaking of the original trilogy, right? He
Correct.
brought in like VFX, like
Correct.
VFX and all of those things, right? Like why, right?
Correct.
Like, why are you doing this?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's that, right? Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Yeah, I think
Uh,
once it's out, right? You shouldn't.
yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's like like it's like I don't know if I'm saying something really wrong, but it's like once you give birth to a baby, right? You can't
Yeah.
go back and change it. Right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, so in terms of like writing rituals, right?
Huh.
I mean. I heard a lot of people say like you need to write every day,
Correct.
write certain hours, certain pages, certain
Correct.
words every day, right? Do you have
Correct.
any rituals like this that you follow?
So I think it's a good idea to just sit down and write. Even if you write 10 words a day and you
Hmm.
spent an hour agonizing over those 10 words, it's fine.
Hmm.
Point is, you have to do it repeatedly every day. I have
Right.
not been doing that. I have been, there have been entire days I've not written at all and I've just done other stuff and not written. So I don't think that's very good for writers. I think
Hmm.
writers need to sit down and write
Hmm.
as much as they can. It doesn't matter how much it is. I think they need to sit and write. As far as rituals are concerned, I don't think I have a ritual. I've worked in entirely unconnected scenarios, like just randomly. I've gone to Goa and I've sat down and written stuff.
Oh, that's nice.
And that too when I'm in my in-laws house and I'm just sitting down there and doing nothing. I have written, and those were not very good pieces. They were really bad and I had to come home and edit it, but I still wrote there.
Right.
The point is, I don't think I need writing rituals. Some people need it because it's sort of a I guess a character trait. I don't know how else to put it, but
Hmm.
I think they need that sort of ritual to get into the flow.
Hmm.
i
Hmm.
don't I don't need that.
Hmm.
I think I can just write wherever, whenever.
That's nice. That's nice. Like what about stuff like like the ambience or setting, right? Some like darkened room,
No.
candles. Yeah, I don't know. Like just saying.
I'm trying to think, but no, I've written in the weirdest of places, so I don't think I have any setting that needs to be set up for.
Right.
I think I can write anywhere. I don't have a problem.
That's good. Even like with distractions and all of that.
Distractions are not
Okay.
considered as writing environments. They're just distractions.
Right.
But if there's ambient sounds, like
Yeah.
if there's cars going by and nobody else disturbing you, you can write. If there's just waves going by, that's even better.
Hmm.
If you're in a house with children screaming and it becomes ambient sounds, it's fine. But if it's not ambient, then it's a problem. So
Right. Right.
yeah, I think I do fine if it's not very disturbed. I mean, the environment is not very disturbing. I think I'll be okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, same for me
Ah,
also pretty much the same. It's either extreme quiet or
ah,
ambient sounds, right? Ambient sounds
ah,
including, like even if there's like a large crowd of people, but
ah.
it's the crowd is not really.
Interacting with you.
I'm not involved in that, right?
Correct.
It's still fine, right? I can cut that
Ah.
out.
So
But
coffee
the
shops and all.
I've not really tried that whole thing of sitting in a coffee
Coffee
shop and
shops.
writing. Maybe
Ah,
I should. But yeah, I think a coffee shop might work.
right, right. Okay.
Uh,
Nice.
yeah. Um, Okay, now the first point that you mentioned about, people not really recognizing that a writer is part of,
Writing
a person
process.
who creates a comic book or a graphic novel, right? What do you think the role of a writer really is? Apart from writing, obviously, right? Apart from dialogues and captions and things like that. What really is a writer? What is a writer there for?
Look, I think I don't know if there are writers abroad who've actually, sorry, I don't know if writers, not right. Why do I keep saying writers? I don't know if there are artists abroad who've actually written their own stuff. I'm sure there are. And there are quite a few artists who've written good stuff and bad stuff.
Hmm.
The point is, I don't think artists are very good storytellers, at least in India.
Hmm.
Like if I sit down and think about it, I don't think some of my artists would be able to tell very good stories. I might be pleasantly surprised. I mean, if they write a story and then they draw it, it'll be very nice if they do
Hmm.
it. But I don't think they're very good storytellers. So I don't think that comics made by them would sell much.
Hmm.
I think you need a writer
Hmm.
to essentially put down the to set the groundwork essentially to
Hmm.
to write the story and give it to them, and then they change it according to their visual sensibilities, which is fine.
Right.
The essence needs to be there. Like
Hmm.
you need a writer to write the story.
Right. Right.
Without a writer, uh, I don't think a very good comic book will be made. Like
Hmm.
I've seen terrible comic books in India that are just bad, and I don't know what to say to them.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think writers are important. That being said, I don't think writers are respected, which is fine. I think uh, I think it's okay as long as you're getting paid and as long as you're getting more work from anyone. I don't think it matters whether people recognize you or not.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Got it. when you said it, right? I was
Uh,
just thinking some guy's going to watch this interview and clip out that portion that says artists are not very good storytellers. It's going to be a reel somewhere. Anyways, so yeah, so there is, I do agree to some of the points that you mentioned, right? That, um, yeah, in fact, the sort of notion, not notion, like the sort of philosophy I subscribe to is also that the vision, right,
mm,
needs to come from the writer. That,
correct,
okay, what is this world that you're creating, right? What should it feel like? What should it taste like, smell like,
correct,
all of that, right? Those are the things that you need to inspire your artist with, or put in
correct,
their head, and then of course they do their their magic
correct,
by translating that onto a page, right?
correct,
But I think without that vision, right, that's where
uh,
we comics end up becoming generic,
correct, correct,
right? It feels like just anything, just any other story, right?
correct,
And uh, yeah, and yeah, we do have the issue of you know, it really depends on the sort of experience that an artist has had, right? Like
correct,
for example, if I'm working with someone like like Tadam or maybe Gaurav, right?
correct.
Those guys know they've been in the industry, right? So even if
Correct.
you are like a not a great writer, right, they can sort of flesh out the world for you.
Right, right. They can take care of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but otherwise you need to put in that detail, right? Like even if you're putting in like blocks of prose, it's fine. It's for
Correct.
the writer to understand. Which
Correct.
brings me to one very interesting thing that I saw. I don't know if you've seen this. Alan Moore's script for Watchmen. Okay. The
Huh.
first page of Watchmen, right, where you have that coin,
Correct.
the badge, rather the
Correct.
smiley thing, right?
Correct.
I think it's just very few panels. It's like raindrops, right?
Huh.
And then they show that thing with blood on it and all of that, right?
Correct.
You
Correct.
could see that the way he's written the script. Oh my God, right? I'll put it on the screen at some point.
Huh.
It is a wall of text, okay, in all caps, okay.
Wow.
He's described only one panel in that.
Huh.
That panel he's described in one whole page, blocks and blocks and blocks of text. Okay, and
Wow.
then Dave Gibbons is basically what he's done is that is so dense
Huh.
that Dave Gibbons has actually highlighted parts of it. That okay, this makes sense. I should take this. I should take this. Right. So see, that's also a way of working, right? It's
Right.
like
Right.
like as a writer, you've experienced that world so vividly in your head.
Yeah.
Put it
Yeah.
out, you need to write like entire opinion pieces or like walls of text for your artist to get, which there's nothing wrong with it. And I think that's how writers should function
Yeah. Yeah.
also. So yeah, interesting points. And about respect.
Huh.
Yeah, I you know it's how do I put it? It's hard, again, it's hard to explain what we do
Yeah.
as writers in a comic book medium, right? Like, in fact, let's say you just, Comic Con, right?
Huh.
You have your foreign guests coming over, right? Um, as an artist, it's easy to go to them and say, "Hey, look, I drew this," right? To be like,
Huh.
"Oh, great," right? As a writer, what do you go and like, "Hey, read this, I'll wait, okay? I'll wait for your opinion."
Yeah.
You
Actually.
can't, right? So artists, I feel it's like a long game also, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
it takes years for you to even actually get recognized or
Correct.
appreciated. Appreciation is like a far off story, right? Even recognized it takes years sometimes. So yeah,
Right.
it is a challenge, definitely. Um, now talking a little bit about because we spoke about working with artists. That whole process you follow with artists, right? Like how much do you prescribe, the layout of a page or how a panel should look like?
So I think very recently, like initially, I used to be very descriptive in my in the stuff that I wrote. I used to
Hmm,
be very finicky about, it should be this way, it shouldn't be any other way. This is how it should be presented,
hmm,
and stuff like that. And the artists used to go along with that. They just draw and then move on to other things. But that's how I was. I was a little bit controlling before. Now, however, I don't think I'm like that. My descriptions are very brief. They're to the point. They just
hmm,
tell you what needs to be done. Whatever the artist thinks of, it's fine with me. I don't have a problem with that.
hmm,
And which is very surprising because recently this guy I'm working with, Alapan, uh,
Hmm.
I think you've met him.
Yeah, of course.
He so I don't know what his problem is, because he takes stuff from me, then he draws something and he says, do you think this is good? And I think, okay, maybe this could be different, or I just leave it as it is. I'm like, fine, just do whatever it works for me. Then 2 days later, he'll come back to me again with the same page and say, I've drawn this differently. Do you think this will work better? I'm like, why do you need to do so much effort? And I look at the page and I'm like, okay, this is much better than what you had drawn before. So,
Right, right.
in that sense, right, the writer is not important at all in the process, because the
Hmm.
artist is figuring out things by himself.
Hmm.
He's doing stuff by himself. He's trying to figure out what to do.
Right.
And I think that's a very important part of comic book making.
Correct.
I think you need to be like that, like him.
Hmm.
So I don't think I'm interested in my part in that whole process.
Hmm.
I'm not at all a part of it. I'm just there to give him feedback or reassurances that he's doing well.
Right, right.
So I yeah, no, the writer is
It's
kind of irrelevant in that position. So
got
once
it.
you've written your script and send it off, right, it's up to
Hmm.
the artist to do whatever he wants with it. It's
Right, right,
like a book. Like, once you've written the book and send it out into the world, it's up to the readers to decide whether they like it or not, or what interpretation they want to take of it. It's
right.
theirs. It's not yours at all.
That's a very interesting point of view, right? Because I've heard this being like there's a quote that's going around in cinema, especially in the South Indian cinema, right? Where there's this director and camera DOP called Rajiv Ravi. Okay,
Uh,
who's a very popular director filmmaker.
Correct.
He said something like, "Once you've written the script,
Huh.
burn the script." Right, which literally means that, okay, once you internalized it,
Correct.
then leave the execution to the people who do it best, right?
Correct. Correct.
So this is kind of like somewhere in that zone, I realize, right? That uh,
Yeah.
you kind of by leaving certain things open, you are forcing the artist to sort of improvise, bring in their own creativity and things like that.
Correct. This is essentially a collaborative thing, right? I mean,
Correct,
you're
correct,
not the only one working on it. There are so
correct,
many other people working on it. So I think it's important to give it to other people and then just let it be the way it is supposed to be.
correct, correct. Yeah, like sort of ownership, right? Ownership
Yeah.
naturally comes out of giving
Correct.
it, leaving it open, right? Yeah.
Correct. Correct.
That's actually a big challenge I have now also, because I am notoriously infamous for over prescribing and to a point of camera angles and all of that.
So
Uh,
I think in a few years you would have changed. I don't think you'll have this obsession of
right.
bringing your vision to comic books, because in the end it's about how you make a person feel at the end of that book,
Yeah,
at the
correct,
end of it. So I
correct.
don't think the little details are that important. They are important, of course. I mean, if
Mm,
they're deviating from what you've imagined,
mm.
definitely go in and change that. But I think over time you will you will learn to let go of these things.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. I think I'm already sort of headed in that direction.
it,
Yeah.
it's okay. Take your time. Just do whatever you have to do. But then eventually you'll feel a little, yeah, nahi chahiye ye sab.
And no, and I also notice artists getting frustrated, right? They're like, okay, I'll just do like whatever this guy said, right?
Correct, correct,
Uh, yeah, and then when you realize that, okay, it's just what I said, nothing beyond that, then you start fighting with them, right? Like, why is it just like, yeah, so
correct.
leads to more problems, I realize.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay, which is a good segue to disagreements, right? So
Ah.
obviously there are points where you disagree with your artist or even your publisher and things like that, right? How do you resolve those? Or do you resolve those?
If you asked me, if I so I've had not I've not had any disagreements with my artists. I might have said stuff to them that they might not have liked,
Hmm.
and then they've done their work.
Hmm.
But I don't think I've gone to the extent of not being friends with people because of the way I work.
Right.
That has happened to me with a publisher, though.
Okay.
Uh, I have not been.
You want me to bleep this
No,
out?
no,
No.
it's fine.
Okay.
So he and I have not been, like, we've been friends for more than years, all right.
Hmm.
And his comic book journey started just around years ago, maybe,
Yeah.
or maybe lesser. I'm not sure. But it's, I don't know what was going on in his head, but I had said, I'm going to write a bunch of stories for you, and this is what I'm going to do for you. And he said, fine, if you want, take more time also and put in more books in the story. And then something happened and stuff happened and whatever. We had a disagreement and I don't think I'm working with him anymore.
Hmm.
So I have only had disagreements with publishers. I
Hmm.
don't think I've had disagreements with artists.
Hmm.
Of late, I've left the entire artistic process to the artist. I don't really
Hmm.
interfere in that much.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of who else I had a disagreement with. I don't understand colors, so I can't give them any feedback on coloring. Right? Lettering, I sort of can give feedback, but I don't, because again, I am not the letterer of the comic. So
Hmm.
I've left that to other people. I don't think I have any disagreements with anyone. No, no.
Didn't you letter Adira Mohi, one of
Yeah,
the?
yeah. I might be lettering a few more comics in the future, but let's see.
Is that like a conscious choice that?
To letter.
Yeah.
So the first two lettering, right? I think so. Somebody else did the lettering for it, and
Hmm.
I think he was also new. So there were a lot of back and forth. I actually drew speech
Okay.
bubbles and said, "Put this here, put this here." So from the third issue onwards, I'm like, forget it. Let me only do whatever I'm
Right. Right.
supposed to do, instead of going through somebody else and telling them 10 times how to arrange things. I
Right.
think
Right.
I think he's also done quite well now.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
Are you talking about by any chance?
he started a lot later.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So, and also, you said that okay, you don't have disagreements with artists.
Yeah.
Okay, which I think there's a something to learn from there, because I think I have disagreements with artists and publishers all the goddamn time, right? And you become so intense, like it's like we're about to kill each other, right? But for me, that's the next question I want to ask also. Because I feel one thing I feel very strongly is for a good product to come out, right?
Hmm.
There has to be some sort of creative friction.
Correct.
Okay. Otherwise, if it's just, hey, bro, here's a script, and then like, hey, bro, great script, and then
Uh,
he gives a page, hey, bro, great page, then, it's like you're just
everything is
patting
going.
each other on the back, right? Uh,
Uh,
so I don't know. Like I always felt that there needs to be some sort of friction, disagreements for great things to happen. And one of the things that reassured this, right? Like I was still sort of not very sure if that's a valid philosophy or not.
correct.
But there's a interview that I saw recently, Anurag Kashyap and Vikram Motwane, right?
Uh,
The Hollywood Reporter interview,
correct.
where it's exactly the same thing, right? They talk about all the horrible fights that they've had, right? Horrible things that they told each other, right? But in the end, the product is great because of this,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
They're like chalk and cheese, right?
Uh,
But
uh,
still, look at the outcome, right?
correct. Correct.
So, I don't know, Dick, do you agree with this, or do you prefer like a more easy-going sort of relationship?
I don't think I like complications in my life, so I usually avoid them.
Right.
Uh, and also, the Indian comic book industry is such that when you ask an artist to do something,
Hmm.
he just does whatever you tell him to do, which is
Hmm.
not necessarily a good thing. I think they should also come forth and say, maybe this shouldn't be this way, this should be this way.
Hmm.
I think that needs to change now. But
Hmm.
uh, that's one of the reasons I've not had any problems with my artists or my letterers or colorers or any of them, colorists, any of them.
Hmm. Hmm.
With my publisher, though, I'm trying to think if I've had any disagreements with Ravi. No, he's just told me my stories are bad and I've had to go back and write them again. So no, I don't think I've had disagreements.
Okay. Okay. Got
Yeah.
it. Uh,
I know
and
that's not a very nice thing to say, because in the end, my product comes out and there's no friction in it, but whatever.
no, I mean, so that's what I see. It's just one. There's no right
Yeah,
answer to this, right? So,
correct, correct.
okay. So now, just going back to that previous question about comic book writers not getting the attention they deserve, right?
Correct, correct.
As a as a person who's probably, just looking to break into the industry, right? Or maybe has just started, right? Any sort of advice you'd give on how do you put yourself out there for people to know that, okay, this is a guy I need to work with, right?
In the
Any,
in
sorry?
the in the Indian comic book industry,
Yeah.
my only advice to them would be, don't work in the Indian comic book industry as a writer. Because
Okay.
there is absolutely no future for you at all. Look, Indian comic books anyway are not doing very well. Like, even if you see Holy Cow or
Hmm.
Bullseye Press or Swayambhu Comics or any of the others, I don't think they're selling more than 1,000 copies in 2 years, 3 years, maybe 4 years, which is very low sales. I don't know why that is. I guess comics are a very specialized
very niche kind of.
So I don't think comic books are a very good place for creatives. I have been stuck in this for so long, so I can't do anything about it, which is why I'm trying my hands at other things. But I don't think comic books are the best place for anyone to get into. That being said, if anyone wants to get into it, just be ready to adapt to whatever the ways that people work. Once you adapt to that, then you can probably have a better footing. Once you have some experience, you can learn from what you've seen, what you've done, what you've experienced, and then maybe you can set yourself up a little better and then conduct yourself accordingly, I guess.
Right. There have been, in terms of artists, right? There have been breakout artists, right? Like people who started in the Indian industry and now are working internationally, right?
Yeah.
But the same thing to writers, I think there's probably one guy, right? Who's Rambi, right? Why is that the case?
I don't know. So here's the thing, right? I don't think any Indian writers, me and you included, are yet at a position where we can write for foreign publishers. The kind of American stories that are required, right?
Right.
We are not evolved enough to write for American audiences. We are more evolved to write stories for our audiences, and even then, some of us are not adapted well enough to the audiences as well. So to write, Ram, in fact, went and lived abroad. He's had training abroad. He's I think he went to do his mechanical engineering or some other chemical engineering. I'm not entirely sure, abroad, and he stayed there. So I think he's had some sort of training in dealing with foreigners, and he's kind of grown up in that environment. So I think it's easier for him to go.
He's gotten those sensibilities already. Right?
Yeah, exactly. His sensibilities are okay. For you also, you are in Singapore. I don't know what kind of environment you're growing up in, or you've grown up in the past 4-5 years. So maybe you can write for Singapore audiences. I don't know, but I think that's the essential problem. Unless you're in a certain geography, right? It's very difficult for you to imagine life as a person there and write for them.
It's like what they say about the film industry, right? You need to be in Bombay to
correct.
be part of,
But that's more also because of logistics and stuff like that. That being said, a lot of British writers have written for American comics. I don't know how that is. Britain and America are more or less same in sensibilities. I don't exactly know. So all these big writers like Alan Moore and Garth Ennis and all of them, they're like, they've written for American comics and they've moved there and stuff. So I don't know how that works. At least in terms of Indian comics, I don't think the sensibilities transfer very well.
But there's also this sort of okay, I mean, going back to Ram, right? If you look at some of the stories that he's putting out, at least, right?
Correct.
They are Indian stories, right? They're about gods and things like that, right?
Correct.
And they are sort of getting the appreciation from the Western audience also.
Correct.
So is it a question of the kind of stories we're telling, or is it the nature of storytelling itself, right? The style of storytelling, or the genre, or the treatment, right?
Yeah. So essentially, you're asking me if his stories feel Indian, and that's why people of the West are reading it, or
no, more like see, they know it's an Indian story because it talks about asuras and all of that, right?
Correct.
But then is it that his treatment of the story is more sort of catering to a Western sensibility?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he is writing for a Western audience, and he is sort of Western, even in the lens that he takes to the stories.
Right.
I think that's there. I think, like, even if you read that story about his graffiti's wall, I think, where he's writing about a boy in the Indian slums, it doesn't feel like a boy in an Indian slum, because a boy in an Indian slum would be probably out playing with his friends or getting sick, or maybe dying also. So I don't think all of that comes into his stories. Story is more aspirational.
Mm.
Stories are more, people can break out of this and get out there, which is
Right, right.
a very good message. But I don't know if that's the reality of things around here.
Right, right, right. Okay. It's kind of again, I keep trying to contrast things with the film industry, right? Because
Ah,
in the film industry now they say that the more rooted your story, the more international it is, right? Like
correct.
your triple R and things like that, right?
Ah, ah,
They're not pandering to the Western audience at all, but
correct,
the Western audience have celebrated it for
correct.
whatever reason, right? Whereas in comics, it doesn't seem to be exactly that way. You still need that Western lens to cater to a Western audience. Because
Correct.
so I kind of feeling like there is a difference between literature and like visual
Correct.
medium, right? The way people appreciate things.
I think even books, like if you take our books and sell it there, they won't do well
Hmm.
unless you really market the shit out of it. I
Right.
don't think they'll do very well.
Hmm.
Um, Again, because of the audience. I mean,
Yeah.
people here
Yeah.
need to read a certain kind of thing. So
Correct. 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 Hmm. Okay. And did you actively sort of try, like in your sort of not formative years, like when you just become a writer, right?
uh,
Did you actively try to pitch yourself to other publishers,
abroad,
abroad or in India, both?
I haven't pitched to anyone.
Hmm.
I think I have been lucky enough that publishers have approached me and said, "Can you write something for me?"
Right,
Because
right.
all of it, right, is
Hmm.
friends. The
Okay.
first time I met Vivek was long before he started making comics or even dreamt of being a comic book or he was dreaming of being a comic book artist, maybe.
Right.
I met Ravi because of Vijendra actually.
Ah, okay,
Vijendra
okay.
actually suggested, I am not going to write. Ravi actually approached Vijay and said, can you write some horror comics for me? He's like, I am
Hmm.
not a horror writer. You can ask this guy who's sort of a horror writer. And then he came to me.
Right, right, right.
And and then I met with him. I wrote a couple of comics with him, and then we sort of became good friends after that.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's less about making comics and more about being
Making
friends.
relationships.
Yeah, yeah, being friends, I guess.
Right, right. Interesting. Yeah, that's a great perspective actually, because that's what I'm seeing also. Like the
Ah,
sort of books that are breaking out and getting like sort of a little more attention than the average book, the other books do. It's happening because of relationships.
ah.
Yeah, which is something I'm very bad at. Uh,
I mean, you're making friends with all the right people. I don't see what the problem is.
yeah, I mean, I am trying to make friends, but then, again, not a people person. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. But yeah, it's a very valid point. I mean, aspiring writers, please note. And I think you answered this question. Is career in comic book writing sustainable in India?
No, no. You
How
have to be
many,
work. You
how
have to be
many
working
book?
somewhere else.
Yeah, that's true. It has to be a supplementary sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
How many books do you think you need to write in a year to survive?
To survive, 12
Yeah.
books at least.
Sorry, how many?
12 at least.
12. Okay, that's yeah,
Yeah,
one a
very
month.
aggressive comic book, this thing. But yeah, I don't write those many comic books, but yeah, you need to.
Right, 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 right. Hmm.
12, 24-page comics should be fine.
Right, right. I
Just to
don't,
get by.
right. I don't think we even release 12 books a year.
Exactly. I don't think publishers make those many comics at all. So
Yeah.
for you to actually be able to survive, which means you have to write 12 comic books,
Hmm.
and publishers you don't even get 12 comic books in a year from different publishers. So
Correct,
it's
correct.
it's very it makes no sense.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Okay, so just some random questions, right? Uh, uh, Thoughts on this whole so this is whole I don't know, I see some groups where people keep saying comic book and graphic novel are two different things,
Right.
right? My question, are they two different things, right?
Uh,
And is one considered more important or more serious than the other?
so I think not very recently, like in the past. So I think uh, graphic novels, right? The word graphic novel came
Hmm.
into our existence very recently. It's not a thing from the past.
Hmm.
Everything is comic books. Whatever you read
Hmm.
that is in graphical format is a comic book. Graphic novels, I think they just brought in the term to make it more respectable. I think
Hmm.
people have to like look at it and say, "Acha, this is comics for kids and this is graphic novels for adults."
Right, right,
So I don't. I think Alan Moore said it much better, or somebody else, one of the other big names said it. I think Alan Moore said it much better, saying it's just marketing strategies
right.
for big companies to sell their product to someone bigger, like movies
Hmm.
and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So even if you go to Marvel right now, they'll probably say graphic novels for the movies that they're making. I don't
Right.
think they'll say comic books.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had the same thought actually that it's sort of an optics thing, right? To make
Correct.
something feel a lot more serious than it is.
Yeah,
Which
important.
is why I was thinking if we started calling all of our books graphic novels, will people take us more seriously, right?
I don't think so. I don't think that works in India.
Yeah. And of course, there's always this perception, right? The moment you say you're writing comic books, it's like, oh, some kid stuff,
Ah,
right? It's very hard to explain. Like, I don't know how to explain it to my parents either, right? That, I'm not writing stuff for kids, I'm writing for adults. But the moment I say it, I'm writing for adults, it sounds like something else, like I'm writing porn or
exactly.
something,
Yeah,
right? So,
yeah.
yeah. And okay, another hotly sort of debated topic is AI, right? AI, so we're already seeing like a sort of influx of AI comics, AI generated comics and all of that, right? But from a writing perspective, okay, maybe first your thoughts on these AI generated comics, right? And two, from a writing perspective, do you think AI really poses any kind of threat to a writer?
Are you asking me, is it different for an artist and different for a writer, or are you
No,
just asking?
no, I mean not really a compare and contrast, but
Correct.
your thoughts on both.
I think I think off late AI has kind of plateaued. I
Hmm.
don't think they're getting any better because
Hmm.
from what I remember, I think 2 years ago uh, they promised another version of, I don't know if it's Chat GPT or something else, but they
Hmm.
promised version 5 or something
Hmm.
2 years ago, and right now they've released a version 4.5.
Hmm.
This
Hmm.
makes no sense because AI can essentially only do a certain amount of work, and beyond it, it's kind of stupid.
Hmm.
It essentially takes in whatever you've said to it and then builds on that.
Right.
Even if you take the entire world's information and put it into a machine and then ask the machine to produce something, I don't think it's very good at making good art.
Hmm.
I mean, you've seen images where people have 6 hands and 10 hands or 10 fingers and stuff.
Because yeah,
So
yeah,
it's very weird to think that AI can actually go beyond a certain point. That being said, when it first came out, I was of the opinion that if it's AI, let it do whatever it wants. I mean, you can't really which is what people in the past have said before, right? Like you should stop machines and you
yeah,
shouldn't
yeah,
use
yeah.
machines.
Right,
And then the machines took over their jobs and did it much better,
right.
which is what I feel about AI. But yeah, I know it kind of undercuts my whatever work I'm doing. It just takes it away from me and gives it to a machine which can be bought for about $500 a year. But yeah, I'm very I don't know how to feel about AI. I don't like it, but I
Hmm.
understand the need for it.
Right.
If they're able to actually crack that, you know, the table that they're at right now, and make much better stories than we can, I
Hmm.
guess you can. But even then, it's not written by a person. There's no history behind that person having written it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like a very good. I don't know.
Hmm.
My thoughts are very muddled. I'm
Feels inauthentic, right?
yeah,
Hmm.
it feels inauthentic. Yeah.
Uh, Do you feel, is AI part of your workflow today in any capacity?
I use AI a lot. Like I type into Chat GPT how to write this story, and then it gives me a bunch of things, and I completely
Right.
ignore it because they're very stupid suggestions.
Yeah.
So that way it's
100%.
very
Yeah.
important.
Correct, correct. So, same thing. So, again, like I'm one of those people who believe that technology will keep changing, right? Like if you don't catch up, you'll be redundant, right? So, even I use it, right? But here's my pet peeve. Again, I use it for process-related improvements, right? Like, okay, I have a story, right? I want to summarize it into one page. I use the damn AI, right? And then I
Ah,
correct it on top of that. I don't want to spend time, like, right?
editing.
Because I'm trying to write for film, right?
Ah,
And the issue with film is, people want the same story in so many different formats. People
Correct.
want a one pager, one paragraph, two pager, three pager. You go crazy after a point, right? So these kind of things, 100% use AI, right? It's
Yeah.
slave labor, right? That's what AI is supposed to do. That's what it's good at, right? Summarizing, right?
Right.
It can
Right.
do it. But what my pet peeve is, okay, leave aside the art part of it. I think enough people have spoken about it, right? Um, from a writing perspective, what I'm seeing right now is I'm part of these screenwriting Facebook groups. Okay,
Ah,
few of them at least. There are people who show up there and say, "Hey, I can write a screenplay in a day." Right? Just give me your idea and write it in a day, right? And yeah, AI can generate like a 90-page screenplay, right? Which,
correct.
if you scan through it, looks, yeah, this looks like a screenplay. The moment you start reading it, right, that's when you realize, like, what the fuck, right? And the what I'm angry about is these people calling themselves screenwriters,
Right.
right? When you've not thought about anything, right?
Correct.
You may have had a paragraph of an idea, but then the AI has done the work, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Um, and there are a lot of people who fall for this, right?
Ah,
This is even happening in comic books, right? There are people actually generating like entire stories, right, and
mhm.
putting that out. Not just in India, I'm talking about even Western. If you look at Amazon,
Ah,
Amazon is flooded with AI generated books. Okay, like it's stuff entirely written in
right.
ChatGPT, and and the thing is, right? I've become so not self-aware. I've become so aware of ChatGPT that the
Ah,
moment I see a paragraph, I know this is ChatGPT, right?
yeah.
There are certain things that character traits
Ah,
that it has, like the
correct.
way it uses like the double hyphen and things like that.
Correct.
Only ChatGPT will do that. Nobody else will do that. Okay, no human
Yeah.
writer will use it. So it's come to that point. I see it and like, no, I was like, screw this. I'm not going to read this. So yeah, that is a big problem. But I do feel that yeah, AI is not going to replace a writer.
Correct. Correct.
It can pretend very well to replace a writer. People who
Correct.
are not aware
Hmm.
are going to fall for that trick, right? But eventually they'll realize that that this
Yeah,
isn't
it is.
working.
Yeah.
Because it's like you said, right? AI is generated based on things that have existed in the
Correct. Correct.
past, right? It cannot produce anything new. It can just
Right.
jumble those things together and release, like put
Correct.
out some shit that feels new, but is not,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think the most important thing, AI does not have life experience, right? That a human being does, right? It cannot
Correct.
bring in perspective. AI does not have perspective. AI's
Correct.
perspective is the perspective of the data set that it was trained on. So yeah, I feel, I mean, I hope so, that we're still relevant. Or, when, I don't know, I hope Skynet doesn't happen.
So I don't think Skynet can happen. I mean, looking at the state of AI these days, I don't think something that advanced will happen. It
I,
seems a little
I don't know, man. Like, I don't trust Elon Musk and Sam Altman, especially now that they're, working at the Doge program and all of that, right? They might just do it. It's the same Oppenheimer problem, right? That it's a bunch of people who are obsessed with the idea of can they do it, that
ah,
they did not stop and think should they do it.
correct.
Right? These guys, just to prove the world wrong, they might actually end up creating something like this, which is the scary sort of part.
But then Elon Musk isn't exactly a very good person, right? I mean, at
That
anything he does.
that's the dangerous part, right? It's like, you're handing over nuclear weapons to a baboon, right? You have no idea what will happen.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, so that's okay. And anything else from advice to junior writers' perspective, right? Any specific thing that you think has worked for you that might help them?
That has worked for me.
Hmm.
I don't think anything has worked for me. Like everything I do is like it's always reiterative or something
Hmm.
entirely different. Or
Hmm.
I think you just need to write, man. I think you just keep writing and then keep getting better at it. You'll
Hmm.
you'll be you'll be shit at it for your entire life, and some people might like the shit that you put out, but
Hmm. Yeah.
eventually it's just going to be, yeah, I know. I have no advice for writers.
But there's a valid point there, right? That there's that whole theory of 10,000 hours, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That the first 10,000 hours is all going to be shit, right?
yeah.
But you need to get past that, beyond that to be. even
Good.
remotely good, right? Yeah. So which also ties back to the first point you made that write something every day, right? Even if it's
Correct.
10 words, right?
Correct.
Um, Question about criticism, right? So how do you take criticism for your work? Like, do you take it well? How do you respond to it?
So I work in a very isolated environment. The only
Hmm.
people I interact with are my publishers.
Hmm.
There are people online who say shit about my work, and that's fine. That's their opinion. But thankfully, I have not got any negative, you know, noise about my work. I'm trying to think. Has anyone said, "Yeah, I mean the book that I told you about"? Ravi said it's not good, and I looked at it and I
Hmm.
realized that it was not good. So I think I've been fortunate enough that people have told me when my stuff is not good.
Hmm. Right.
So, and I've realized that as well. So
Hmm.
I don't think I don't think that's a problem really. No.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
हाँ, नहीं.
Okay. That's good. Again, something to learn for me, I guess, because for me, right,
हाँ.
the issue is okay. I mean, I'm a bit of a short-tempered person, like most people, uh, and the I put in like a year of work to produce a book, right? And
हाँ.
once it goes out there and someone, see, it's okay to not like the book, right? Like it doesn't
Correct.
work for me, that's fine, right?
Correct.
But the
Correct.
moment I see someone commenting on something that is not what I intended at all, right? Or just twist it into something else, right? Then I feel like, or at least I used to feel like I need to justify this, right? I need to
हाँ.
tell this person that no, this is what
This
I
is
thought, right? Like you're wrong, you're blah blah. And I used to do a lot of this in the first year of being in comics, which was like 2021 or whatever,
correct.
right? I used to respond to every post saying that no, 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 this is what I intended, right? All of that. But yeah, but it was after that 1 year, right, that I really sort of realized that you don't need to respond to anything, everything. Right.
Exactly.
People will say, I mean, you can't control how people
Yeah.
react, right? Once a book is out there, it's owned by the people, right?
Correct. Correct.
They hate it, right? You can't do anything, you can't go back, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, and it's a waste of energy, effort,
Correct.
all of that. You should just move on to the next thing, right?
Right. Right.
Um,
That's
uh,
good advice actually.
yeah, yeah, because I mean, it's about priorities, right? You need to think about what
Correct.
are you here for, right? I'm not here for internet drama. I'm
Correct.
here to put out more stories, right? So just about going back to that. Okay, maybe a few final questions.
Hmm.
Um, I think you answered this maybe already, but is the Indian comics industry dead?
I think so.
Okay.
I don't.
Oh,
So
but was there like a golden period at some point?
I think there was back when Raj Comics was publishing, right?
Hmm.
Everyone in the north was buying stuff.
Right, right.
So I think there was quite a lot of need for comic books back then. But again, this is just my perspective of the north. I
Hmm.
don't know what's happening in the south. I don't know what's happening in Bengal. I don't know what's happening over there. So
Right.
there are people who are still reading comics there. In Bengal,
Hmm.
I know there are people who are reading comics.
Right.
In the south, I believe there are people who are reading comics. Like Phantom and Mandrake are selling magnificently over there.
Hmm.
So I'm quite sure there are people over there, but we don't have that kind of reach. For some reason,
Correct.
there
Correct.
aren't, like, the publishers aren't able to reach those people who want to read comics.
Correct.
So I think it is sort of dead because we are
Hmm.
only catering to to basically central India.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I don't know if comics is dead everywhere else, but central India certainly, because people have grown up. They
Hmm.
don't have enough time to read comics.
Correct.
So
Correct.
a lot of them don't read comics anymore, and they've
Right.
stopped buying comics and stuff like that.
Right.
People who do read comics are actually active comic book people, and
Right.
that's where the sales happen.
Hmm. So it's either collectors or
Yeah, yeah,
that kind of crowd, right?
yeah.
But then so post the sort of Raj comics not being at the forefront, you feel it's from that point onwards, right? Or was there any sort of boom in between, like in the
No,
2000s or anything?
no. I think that time where Raj Comics did well, and then Diamond Comics was also there,
Uh-huh.
and a
Yeah, yeah.
couple of those others. I think Pinky. I'm not entirely sure if that is Diamond or Raj or something.
Pinky is Diamond, Diamond.
Ah, okay. So then those comics did well because at that time they kind of, people were reading comics. People were reading, like,
Right.
you'd go to a stations. In fact, before
Ah,
at railway stations, you used to get
right.
everything. And
Right.
railways were the only way of traveling from one place to the other. So there were
Correct.
more
Correct.
people traveling.
Correct. Correct. Hmm.
So that could be one reason. Yeah. And I remember our local newspaper guy, right? He
Uh-huh.
used to stack comics, DC comics, in fact. I have read DC comics from the locals over here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now he just keeps magazines and newspapers, and even those are not doing well. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think before it was quite nice. I think that era when Raj Comics was doing well, I think
Hmm.
I think that was the golden age, and after that, it's just been a obsidian age of sorts.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting. Because for me also, I kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm looking at it with a different lens because I never considered that there was a industry of sorts, right? Like nothing of the size of the scale of the US, right? Or the
correct,
any of the
correct,
Western publishers, right?
correct.
Diamond, yeah, I did read it when I was younger, right?
Ah,
Raj Comics I had no access to.
correct.
Diamond I used to read.
Ah,
But then after that, I felt like maybe it was not really a boom, but it was more like aware, like my awareness about Indian comics existing, right? That
ah,
in I think 2010 onwards is when I started, like indie comics, right? Like
ah,
comics.india, Bharat
correct,
Murthy, his
correct, correct,
stuff, and
correct.
then, Pulpocracy and stuff like that, right?
Ah,
That's when I started noticing, and then maybe I tried to actively seek those out, which is why I'm aware of these things, right?
correct.
But I did feel like, around the 2010, 2015, there were a lot of publishers,
Right, right.
which now also I think we're back to that same situation. But a lot of publishers then died out, and now
Ah,
post COVID, it's kind of come back,
correct.
right? So that bell curve is happening right now.
So I think during COVID, right, people had nothing to do and they were locked up in their houses.
Yeah,
They started buying comics.
right, right.
That
Yeah,
was the time when a lot of people bought comics, and a few new editions came in because of people who started reading then.
correct, correct.
I think
Hmm.
I think that could be one of the reasons.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. COVID was also the time where there was a lot of return back to physical media sort of thing,
Ah,
right? People started buying vinyl and, like actual physical books and all of that.
correct.
Yeah, that did definitely contribute. But I also feel this, like in the Indian comics, right?
Ah,
There are these um, books that are released today, right? Are
correct.
only appreciated maybe 5 to 10 years later. Like
Ah,
for
I get you.
example, people are recently, a lot of people talking about this book called Odayan, right?
Ah,
Uh, Suha Sundar, right?
yeah,
Which came out like when, right? I read it back then.
yeah,
But there's a resurgence of that happening right now.
correct.
Um, TNT is something that's still spoken
Ah,
about right
correct.
today. So maybe that's a thing with the Indian industry, right? Like whatever we are putting out today, maybe some guy might
10
appreciate
years.
it 10 years later, right?
Could
Yeah.
That's a nice way of looking at things, and continuing with your work right now, hoping that it will get better in 10 years.
A bit too optimistic, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, which year were you born in?
85.
Oh, okay, okay. So not that far off. Okay.
All right. So, great conversation. I think a lot of points that I hope people would love to listen to as well. Great perspectives. Just so in closing, right, just wanted to ask, are there any books that you want to plug or any upcoming projects or any other things, not just writing, maybe other stuff as well that you want to plug?
Not really. I mean, I've
Like
written Salim manga, so that's out.
maybe I'll just plug it on your behalf. So everyone, please read Zalim Manga from Bullseye Press. It's a very fun read.
Ah,
Had a lot of fun. In fact, I was a little daunted to get into manga. I'm not a manga reader,
ah,
right?
correct.
So I was like, I kept this off for a while. But then I started and I was like, oh, this is quite fun, right?
Correct.
And I think it kind of helped that you guys kept the story not too complicated, little
Correct. Correct.
breezy, right? It's
Correct.
like all action, that kind of stuff, and all the homages and references and
Yeah.
all really good. I given my feedback to Ravi, so maybe you can
Yeah.
get some from him. Any other book that's coming out soon?
Adhira Mohi and Raj Rahman should be out,
Oh,
but
okay.
I don't know when they'll. Maybe this year they'll be out. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay. I also noticed like you're working with Radiant on Shadow Blade.
So I wrote for Radiant almost 15 years ago.
Huh?
Yeah, I
Okay.
wrote for Radiant almost 15 years ago, and that's what they're coming out with today.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait. So, but oh, so they're drawing. I mean, they sort of the story is there,
No,
but then
the story was there. The
uh,
art was also ready back then, but I don't think so. The publisher, right? He had to
hmm,
leave India and go out and study.
okay,
So he left and went there, and he came back, and then he did some stuff here, and then now he's gotten into publishing. So
okay.
Radiant, the first book that I wrote, that came
Hmm,
out 15 years ago.
hmm.
Parts 2 and 3 sort of came out now, so I had to write it now almost.
Oh, wait. Now, okay, wait, now it's kind of coming back. I think I've heard the name Shadow Blades elsewhere, like a while back.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, okay. That's interesting. See, I
yeah,
told you, things come back after 10 years.
yeah.
Okay, interesting. Any other stuff like you want to plug your YouTube?
Oh, my YouTube, I think Gutter Space and the other one, Psycho Film Pirate.
Hmm.
That'll always keep changing, but yeah. Yeah, they should be available somewhere. I don't know how you're going to put the link here, but
I just put a card or maybe yeah. So any reason why you decided to split the channels into two, like comics and movies separate?
yeah, because comics and movies. So I was planning to talk about comic books and the comic book films and
Yeah,
whatever comic book related stuff.
yeah.
And I wanted to talk about film separately. And more importantly, my old channel, I don't know what happened. People stopped coming to the videos and they
Yeah, so, some algorithm screw up. Yeah.
yeah. So I've started again.
Hmm. Okay. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
And I hope you guys, like you and Bohanti, you guys continue doing those sessions. Those are quite fun.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah. So thanks a lot for coming on this episode. You are guest number two.
Oh, nice.
So if I ever make like an action figure of the guests to come on, you'll be the second one to receive one.
Cool,
Uh,
cool.
all
Nice.
right. Thanks. It was lovely talking to you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.